dear friends and brothers and sisters. Thank you for inviting me to be here this evening and to say a few words on the occasion of the 11th anniversary of the Ascension of Father Moon. And thank you especially to Robin and Margaret, my very good friends, and all the team who work so hard to make this event and all the work you do possible. And personally, it's always a pleasure to join you here at Lancaster Gate. So many of you will be so much more qualified to speak about Father Moon than me. I never met him in person, although I was privileged to hear him speak when he visited London and later again in Geneva. Nevertheless, I feel I do bring my own perspective, and Father Moon also came to touch my life and influence me in a unique way, just as everyone's experience in this regard will surely be unique to them. I became interested in North Korea from an early age, and I started visiting the country from 1983. I met President Kim Il-sung on several occasions. And I'll be honest with you, my impression of Father Moon in some earlier times was not a good one. He was known as a lifelong anti-communist, and North Korea considered him an enemy, as we've seen on the film, as Robin has alluded to. So when I heard that Father Moon was to visit Pyongyang and about his meeting with Kim Il-sung, I'm not sure, or I don't fully recall, whether my initial reaction would better be described as surprise or shock. I phoned my friend at the North Korean diplomatic mission in Paris to ask him for an explanation in his view and to try to better understand what was happening and its significance. There was no diplomatic representation of North Korea in London at that time. And my friend in Paris responded that maybe it's hard to understand, but particularly with Korean people as they grow older, they think increasingly of their hometown. And moreover, he said, blood is thicker than water. I believe Father Moon also expressed some similar sentiments to this, and certainly the stance taken by the whole unification movement towards North Korea in the ensuing years and decades since that meeting faithfully bears this out. I think it's worth saying something about the timing of Reverend Moon's visit to Pyongyang, and Robin has spoken of the role that played by Fidel Castro, for example, in helping to smooth the way, which shows the level in world politics at which this was taken. And Reverend David spoke about that conference in Geneva in 1985. So in talking about the timing of Reverend Moon's visit to Pyongyang, I'd say it certainly wasn't accidental, and neither was it coincidental. He arrived in Pyongyang on November the 30th, 1991. The communist states in Eastern Europe had collapsed some 2 years previously. The formal dissolution of the Soviet Union was 1 month and 1 day away. China was embracing market reforms and taking steps towards rapprochement with the Republic of Korea to the south, and diplomatic relations were formally established between Beijing and Seoul in August 1992. So as the geopolitical landscape changed so dramatically and rapidly around North Korea, so nuclear tensions mounted on the Korean Peninsula. In other words, it was a time when Father and Mother Moon's death-defying visit to Pyongyang became possible. But not only possible, it became necessary. And not only necessary, it became vital. It became existential for humanity, we can say. Although many of you will already be very familiar with it, let me refer to how Father Moon contextualized his mission in his memoirs. He wrote as follows: "The Korean Peninsula is a microcosm of the world. If blood were shed on the Korean Peninsula, it would be shed in the world. If reconciliation occurred on the peninsula, there would be reconciliation in the world. If the peninsula were unified, this would bring about unification in the world." That's Father Moon's words. So clearly this was no ordinary visit. As for more personal matters, the kind I alluded to earlier, of blood being thicker than water and so on, Father Moon wrote as follows. And he's talking about how he, after having flown into Beijing and then taking a flight from Beijing to Pyongyang, he writes, "The aircraft flew over the Yellow Sea, up to Sinuiju, over my hometown of Jongju, and on to Pyongyang. I was informed that the special route had been charted to let me see my hometown. My heart began to pound as I looked down at my hometown, dyed red in the light of the setting sun, and I felt numb, deep in my being. I wondered, can this really be true? I wanted to jump out right away and start running around the hills and valleys." At Pyongyang's Sunan International Airport, family members who I had not seen for 48 years were there to greet me. My younger sisters, who used to be as beautiful as flowers, had become grandmothers, entering their senior years. They grasped my hands, creased their eyebrows, and began to cry wildly. My older sister, now more than 70, grabbed me by the shoulder and cried. When he finally met with President Kim Il-sung towards the end of his visit, the North Korean news agency described the occasion as being held in, quote, "an atmosphere overflowing with compatriotic feelings." And here is how Father Moon described it in his book As a Peace-Loving Global Citizen. He wrote, "As I approached the official residence, I found President Kim at the entrance waiting to greet me. The two of us simultaneously embraced each other. I was an anti-communist, and he was the leader of a communist party, but ideology and philosophies were not important in the context of our meeting. We were like brothers who were meeting for the first time after a long separation. This was the power of belonging to the same people and sharing the same blood." Now you'll notice the similarity in phrasing. Speaking to Kim Il-sung of his reunion with his own family members and using that to appeal for the reunion of all Korean families divided by the tragic history of the 20th century, he recalled, "I spent a little more time telling him about my visit to my hometown and appealed to his love for the Korean people. He and I spoke the same dialect," as Robin just mentioned, so we were at ease with one another. They even shared the same taste in food, reminiscing about frozen potato dumplings. He writes, "You and I even share similar tastes in food," I said. "It's good that people who share the same homeland can meet like this." And he continued, "Mr. President," I said, "you are older than I, so you are like my older brother." He responded, "Chairman Moon, from now on, let's refer to each other as older brother and younger brother." And he grasped my hand tightly. Now, the words spoken around that table, this was at lunch, the words spoken around that table were not empty ones. Despite all the difficulties and obstacles in the subsequent nearly 32 years, the whole unification movement has stayed faithful to the pledges made by Father Moon at that time and to what I might describe as his compatriotic humanitarianism, be it in investment, such as the Pyeonghwa or Peace Automobile Assembly Plant, or the Potonggang Hotel in downtown Pyongyang, in diplomacy and international understanding and reconciliation, as in visits by the Summit Council for World Peace, or in many acts of philanthropy, not least at times of natural disasters. This legacy is very much appreciated and cherished by both the Kim and Moon families. At the time of Father Moon's ascension, Kim Jong-un, the present leader of North Korea, expressed deep condolences to Mother Dr. Hak Jang-han Moon and the whole family, adding, "Though he passed away, his efforts and feats made for the reconciliation and unity of the nation, the reunification of the country, and the world peace will last forever." Last year, on the 10th anniversary of Father Moon's ascension, it was reported that, quote, "the floral display from North Korea was so large that 2 men had to carry it on stage." The message from North Korea at that time said in part, "Reverend Moon worked for the sake of world peace, and his achievements and legacy will be remembered but for eons. We would like to wish prosperity and success to the International Family Federation and UPF. Just as Father Moon wrote, and I'll repeat his words again, the Korean Peninsula is a microcosm of the world. If blood was shed on the Korean Peninsula, it would be shed in the world. If reconciliation occurred on the peninsula, there would be reconciliation in the world. If the peninsula were unified, this would bring about unification in the world. Ancient Greek philosophers discovered and advanced the concept of dialectics, which teaches that the part is reflected in the whole and vice versa. And this can be seen not just in the situation on the Korean Peninsula, but especially in the beautiful story of Father and Mother Moon's bold and courageous visit to Pyongyang. If that ice could be melted, then no bitterness and no enmity is so intractable as to defy resolution. I believe that this is what animates the wonderful work carried out by the UPF in all parts of the world, and that it also, on a personal level, underlines our own great friendship, which is something I personally have grown to cherish. Thank you very much.